morning, everybody. We're so happy to have you here for the dedication of the Texas Historical Commission's marker for Temple Emmanuel. And I would like to welcome our dignitaries that are here, our special guests. We have the Gregg County Judge Bill Stout, the Mayor of Kilgore, Ronnie Spradlin. The Mayor of Longview is not here now, but he'll be here later this morning before everything's over with. He just has a full plate with what's been going on in our community. And now I would like to post the colors.
Please remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. I want you to join in with me in that. And after Barbara Clinton and her husband sing God Bless America, then you can be seated. So please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
While the storm clouds gather far across the sea, let us swear allegiance to a land that's free. Let us all be grateful for a land so fair as we raise our voices in a solemn prayer. God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her through the night with the light from above. From the mountains to the prairies, to the oceans white with foam. God bless America, my home, sweet home. God bless America, my home, sweet home.
Ready, keep.
Now I would like to recognize any veterans. If you would please stand up so we could say thank you. At this time, I would like to introduce the Honorable County Judge Bill Stout to say a few words.
Which one are we talking to? This one right here, okay. It's a pleasure for me to be here today, and I do appreciate being invited to be included in this ceremony. I do have a proclamation here today I would like to read to you. Historical marker designation of the Temple Emmanuel in Longview, Texas, March 7th, 2015. And I quote, "We dedicate this temple and ourselves to the service of God in this community." Ben Balter, November 16th, 1958, at the dedication of this temple. Whereas the Temple Emmanuel, meaning God is with us, had its origins in Kilgore Temple Beth Shalom, where Mayor Spradlin is here to join us. And whereas due to the growth of the number of families living in Longview and the community to Temple Beth Shalom, the decision was made to build a temple in Longview. And whereas the land was purchased, the cornerstone was laid, and the construction was completed, services began in April 1958. And a formal dedication was held on November 16th, 1958, Temple Emmanuel was born. And whereas Temple Emmanuel has woven threads into our local cultural tapestry with its rich traditions and its steadfast faith, has been an inspiration to all of us in this area. And whereas for 57 years, the members of Temple Emmanuel have enriched our community in immeasurable ways and have unselfishly given of themselves always with a servant's heart. And whereas the generation that built the temple is almost gone, but they have not been forgotten by the remaining congregants. And then therefore, as Gray County Judge, on this 7th day of March, 2015, I hereby proclaim and recognize the importance of this historic status and value of Temple Emmanuel to East Texas. Signed, Bill Stout, County Judge, Gray County, Texas. Thank you all.
Now I have the honor of introducing the Mayor of Kilgore, Ronnie Spradlin, who will start by saying a few words from his youth when he shopped with his mother and father in the various Jewish stores in Kilgore, and then he will read the proclamation that he brought us.
You know, growing up in Kilgore, nearly every other business downtown was Jewish. I remember going as a child to Walman's fashion fabric store to buy my first Cub Scout outfit. My mother would go in Digest Jewelers and Max would show her jewelry. Of course, she could never buy anything, but she liked looking. My dad would go in Hurwitz and would save up to get a Hollywood suit now and then. We would go down to the Rubens drugstore and get, I think that's where I had my first banana split. And when my mother would shop at the Toggery, one of the Gersh brothers, I remember, took me down to the drugstore and bought me 5 Flavors Lifesavers. I was so young that my hand would barely wrap around one of his fat fingers. So Kilgore has quite a heritage of the Jewish community being leaders and being a big part of retail and the history of the community. And I have a proclamation to share with you this morning. Whereas during the early 20th century, many Jewish families settled in small towns of northeast Texas. And during the 1930s, when the oil boom came to Kilgore, Texas, the Jewish community here experienced significant growth. Whereas during the 1930s, members of the Jewish community of Kilgore held their services and holiday observances on the 2nd floor of City Hall. Whereas by 1935, enough Jewish families lived in the area that discussions began regarding the funding and building of a synagogue in Kilgore. Whereas this strong and determined Jewish community had raised the funds and built the Temple Beth Shalom, House of Peace, which opened its doors in 1936 and served as a religious home for congregations from Kilgore, Longview, Gladewater, Henderson, and Overton. Whereas by mid-1950, Temple Beth Shalom in Kilgore had outgrown the 1936 building, and discussions began as to the construction of a new temple, whether in Kilgore or in Longview, where most of the congregation now lived. Whereas, although the ultimate decision was made to build a new temple in Longview to be named TempleEmanuel, God is with us, Temple Beth Shalom remained open in Kilgore for another several years before closing permanently in the mid-1960s. Whereas since its formal dedication in 1958, Temple Emmanuel in Longview has been a source of strength and inspiration in Longview and the surrounding area, and the city of Kilgore is proud to have been the site of Temple's original roots and membership. Now, therefore, I, Ronnie Spradlin III, Mayor of the city of Kilgore, do hereby proclaim Saturday, March 7th, 2015, as Temple Emmanuel Day in the city of Kilgore. Thank you.
At this time, I'm supposed to be calling our mayor up here, but I know his plate is full and something I hope is okay that he's not here, so we may pull that in at the very end. At this time, as you have seen on the back of your program, there's 3 different congregations. The 2 that fed this congregation are in black and white, and ours is in the middle, because we're alive and well and kicking. So now, my husband Mindy will speak about Beth Shalom, because he was born and reared in Kilgore in that congregation, Audrey Carroll will speak on her original congregation, Moses Montefiore, and Rusty Milstein will speak on this congregation. So I would like y'all to just take turns.
Thank you, dear.
Well, good morning. Thank you for coming. It looks good to see this many people sitting out there in the pews right now. In the early 30s, Kilgore, Texas was a little community of about 700 people. Very nice, quiet community. Oil was discovered in around 32, and Kilgore went, as you heard the words, boomtown, went from 700 people to about 10,000 people in a couple of weeks. Along with it, of course, these people needed services, places to shop, and what else. The Depression was going on and all over the country. In our area in Kilgore in East Texas was booming, and a lot of the Jewish people, merchants from different parts of the country, came down to provide these services, whether it be clothing, it could be shoes, it could be cars or whatever. And around 1936, the early part of 36, my father and mother and my family before me came to Kilgore. Driving down the main street of Kilgore, you could see stores that had Jewish names on it, the Deiches, the Hurwitzes, et cetera, et cetera. And so they all started getting together. There was no place to have congregational meetings or whatever. And to begin with, they started having them in a warehouse that belonged to Sam Goldman. Well, they had a Sunday school there. People would take times being the rabbi and et cetera. And around 1938, a handful of people, my father included, decided to put some money out of their pockets in and build a synagogue in Kilgore, Texas. Legat Krim basically gave them a piece of property to put it on. It was very, very, very nice of him. And they built the congregation Beth Sholem at that time. It was very prosperous. The people from Longview came to Kilgore, Gladewater, Henderson, Overton, the whole surrounding community. After the war and people moving into the area and coming back from the service, we found out we just did not have a big enough building. This was about the first part of the 50s. We had a lot of kids that needed Sunday schools, and in 1955, I was president of the youth group, and teenagers only, we had in the excess of 40 teenagers at that time in this little building in Kilgore. So the people decided they needed a new, larger facility, and the people in Longview were growing faster than the people in Kilgore. So it was basically sat down and to all intent and purposes at Longview, because of the size of the community and the size of the Jewish congregation, it should be built here. Rusty's father was very, very influential in overseeing the building of every piece of steel that went into this building and probably every rock that was in here. And eventually we closed down the temple in Kilgore, and everybody moved to this area here in Longview. And many times I have been on this pulpit, and we had to open those 2 sliding screens and bring in chairs that I would go get from Johnny Case's restaurant and set them up for the high holidays. And it just really looks good to see all the people out here. Thank you very much.
It's so good to be with you today, and I really appreciate you all letting me talk about Temple Moses Montefiore. Today we're really celebrating Judaism in East Texas. You know, Lewis and I are proud to be members of Temple Emmanuel, but we also can't forget Temple Moses Montefiore in Marshall, because we're from Marshall. Lewis was born in Marshall. His dad was born there. We have very deep roots. And our relatives started coming to Marshall in the 1840s. and it was the Doppelmayr family and the Wiseman family. And they had come from a well-established community in Syracuse, New York, and there was a big influx. And that was before Texas even was annexed to the United States. I mean, we're really the oldest kid on the block. That's just all there is to it. By 1869, and to put that kind of in perspective, that is only, 4 years past the end of the Civil War. At that time, the Benevolent Society started in Marshall, and there were 25 members, which of course meant 25 men and their families. And they had the duty of starting religious services and burying the dead. And so that was the first organization. Then I'm going to tell you also that we were one of the earliest Reformed congregations in the state of Texas, along with Galveston. People don't even realize that most of the time. The B'nai B'rith, which I think there was a lodge over here for a while, but that lodge began in 1876. Then, in 1881, they bought the cemetery. That was important. In 1887, they officially began Temple Moses Montefiore. That was officially started then. And they referred to the old congregation because there had been services there since the very beginning, and they handed the Torahs to the new congregation, which was quite interesting. Then in 1892, the women decided to get organized, and they had something called the Jewish Ladies' Aid Society. Their minute books read like a social history of Marshall. Who came, who went, who was sick, who had a baby. They're wonderful. Then in 1900, they built our temple on the corner of Fulton and Burleson, and they planted a tree there. Then in 1931, the ladies organized again and organized a sisterhood, and their major project was selling homemade hot tamales. They made them and sold them. They were well known through the whole community for selling them at the fair. They raised enough money in the depths of the Depression to have an annex. It amazes me, the stories that have come out of this temple. I mention all of those organizations to point out to you that we saved all of the minute books from our congregation. They are at the Harrison County Historical Museum. And I am waiting for the day, maybe Rabbi, you'll know someone, when an eager scholar decides they want to write a thesis or a dissertation on a small Jewish community in Texas, and they're going to find this wealth of material. It's just a treasure trove there. Anyway, a year from now, I have to tell you that I am working very hard for Lewis and I to be a part of an exhibit. The Ark of the Covenant is at the museum in Marshall. And we are now in the process of trying to bring the Ark exhibit to life. And it has the Ark of the Covenant, the eternal light, like you see here. It has the menorahs, like you see here. It has the pulpit chairs, like you see here. So it will be a wonderful exhibit, and there will be personal stories. And I'm going to just touch on a couple of them because they're fascinating, and they just shouldn't be lost. And there were, of course, Civil War stories because people were there and they fought in the Confederacy. Then there were, in 1910, a man named Max Hanman came to be rabbi. And by the way, there were 33 rabbis in Marshall that lived there. Can you even imagine? And I found the biography of the first rabbi. It's fascinating to me. I've been studying it for years. As you can see, I'm really into this subject. And it goes on and on. It comes up to World War II when I found that someone connected to our community was a psychiatrist at the Nuremberg trials. Now, that's really something. Then another person was one of the founders of the HMOs in California with Kaiser Permanente. We have an interview with him. There's just a wealth of material. So all of this will be presented, plus the different ethnic groups in Marshall, because Marshall is a beautiful story. There were 23 ethnic groups, and they all worked together to build the community. And so right now, the Texas Jewish Historical Society, thanks to Rusty, and the Southern Jewish Historical Society have already granted awards for this exhibit. So I'm hoping that within a year, we will be able to raise the rest of the funds from the friends and the families that loved our temple. But when we sold our temple, we came over here. We were welcomed with open arms. We tried to see what this congregation needed from Marshall, and they didn't need much because they already had this beautiful building. They did get the piece like this from the temple, and it has a Star of David. You'll see it in the reception hall, the social hall. And then they had Torahs, half the Torahs and the silver from Marshall are here, from Temple Moses Montefiore. The other half went to Temple Shalom in Dallas, and our daughter Nancy worships there, and Louis and I get to go up there and visit those Torahs. They have them displayed so beautifully. But when I think about it, Louis and I have been worshiping here in Longview for 41 years. Can you imagine the life cycle things that have happened to Louis and me in 41 years? Our children went to Sunday school here. Mark was bar mitzvahed. Ben Balter trained him. They were confirmed here. The rabbis here have been with us during illnesses, during deaths, and the people have just been wonderful. We have such great memories and feel so fortunate that this lovely temple was only 20 miles away from us. Anyway, I guess that I have to take just 1 minute and tell you that in a small congregation, you have to have committed leaders. Now, we know what committed leaders are here because we have them. And they work so hard, and I really thank them. And I also have thought of the people who built this building and what their dreams were for us. And we've had such outstanding rabbis come and go and take care of us. And we remember all of those who have passed, the ones that we really grew to love, don't we, Louis? They're no longer with us, but they gave of themselves to help provide for us in Marshall a spiritual home. And today we do look at our past, and we celebrate those lives that made all of this possible. And I just guess I want to thank them for a job well done. And in Jewish terms, this is what we say, l'chaim, to life. Thank you for letting me share that.
My exercise program. Before I get started with my presentation, I've got to thank two people who are members of the Texas Jewish Historical Society. We had a quarterly board meeting here in October of 2013. These people, their hobby is helping get historical markers. They live in Del Rio. They drove up here for the meeting 2 days before the meeting started. And as Jim knows, they put together everything in those 2 days. Plus, they found a stray kitten that they took to the Humane Society and named it Rusty. So, you know, we just have to thank Doug and Willie Broadway. They got the ball rolling. Now, a little bit about growing up Jewish in Longview. I was born in a place that you guys may or may not remember, Gregg Memorial Hospital. I grew up in the south side of Longview, near Pinewood Park, which is no longer in existence. And we had 3 Jewish families in the neighborhood and numerous Protestant families. And we all played together, and there was never, no parents got involved with any religious stuff or anything. We just had a great time. It was a wonderful place to grow up. And then we get to downtown Longview. When I was a kid and go to the kiddie show on Saturday morning, we would naturally maraud downtown Longview, and you could not go a block on Tyler Street or on Fredonia and not cross paths with a Jewish merchant. Our congregation had doctors. We even had a district judge, Phil Brin, if you remember. It was a very complete congregation. Everybody was active. The adults would have dances, New Year's Eve parties, and don't quote me, casino night. In fact, one of our fraternity brothers, Danny Felsenthal, may he rest in peace, would always seem to come up with dice tables and blackjack tables. Nobody asked questions. The sisterhood especially was so very active with Foodorama, and especially during election years. You could always find somebody running for something there at Foodorama, plus people would order food to be taken home if they had another event so the babysitter and kids could eat. But it was all typically Jewish food. It was great. And we had the sandwich sale, like corned beef and knockwurst and so forth, and we would deliver that. And the ladies would have cake sales. And I think my wife Mitzi worked the table in front of Riffs. No? Okay.
When I started, they were taking orders.
Ah, progression. And one of the best things that this congregation ever did, and thanks to Natalie, she organized a group of people to go to the police department on Christmas Day and do, I guess, non-essential filing and paperwork so the regular employees wouldn't be terribly burdened after the holidays. So it just, and you know, it was just a wonderful experience. We did that for 13 years. And if Glenn Evans is here, you need to get the details from Natalie about that. On the High Holy Days, this sanctuary, which seats 160, 180, would be filled to capacity. And I remember Longview had a Jewish mayor, Colonel Bodenheim. And I remember as a child seeing him wheeled in with his aide at his side for the high holidays. My dad, of blessed memory, was chairman of the building committee, and he told me once that they built this building with the expectation of over 100 Jewish families by the turn of the century. We didn't quite get there, but that's the reason for this big, beautiful sanctuary. Now I'm going to jump over to high school, good old Longview High School. And again, I guess almost everybody there knew I was Jewish, along with several, probably a half a dozen of my classmates. Nothing was ever said about religion. One of the few football games we won, I gave the benediction, or invocation, I'm sorry. The only thing that ever came up about being Jewish was when I ran for student council office. My campaign manager is Jerry McCafferty. Some of you may know Jerry. And one day we came to school and he said, Rusty, I thought of a great campaign slogan. We can put it up on the walls. I said, what is it, Jerry? A Jew for you in 62. I said, I don't think we're going to use that one, but it's a good one. And I guess I'll regress just for a moment, about going back to junior high when I was bar mitzvah. And it was the first time that so many of my friends had ever been to a really dress-up party with dancing and food and so forth. And they were just totally amazed. Well, I hope I'm not stealing Natalie's thunder or something, but this marker is a tribute to our greatest generation. Thank you, guys.
I learned something myself because they've never told me. At this point, I would like to invite our mayor, Jay Dean, to come up, the honorable mayor.
Good morning. Good morning. Where have all y'all been? I mean, I was up here early waiting on you. I was up showing up, so I thought. Surely Natalie gave me the right information. Technology is a wonderful thing. As long as you plug in the right information, it works every time. So sorry for my tardiness, but glad to be here with you this morning. I'm going to do a proclamation. First of all, let me give the Honorable Natalie Rabakoff her copy.
Oh, thank you.
Sure. Archives. TempleEmanuel, God is with us. Longview's Temple Emmanuel established its name on October 20th, 1958. After a decision was made by the membership of Temple Beth Shalom to move its growing congregation from Kilgore to Longview. Services in the new temple began in April 1958. The cornerstone for the new synagogue was laid in 1957. The same year, the 5-acre tract of land was purchased on the eastern side of Longview. Since its existence, Temple Emmanuel members have worked to serve the Jewish community as well as the Longview community. From the 1950s to the 1990s, the sisterhood hosted fundraisers such as Foodorama, cake sales, sandwich sales, and art auctions to pay for books for the religious school, to pay for the upkeep of the temple, and donations to the Longview Community Ministries, Food Box Meals on Wheels, plus other charities. After the sale of Kilgore's Temple Beth Shalom in 1979, money from the sale was used to support the Temple Emmanuel Fund scholarships and pay for grave markers. A menorah from Temple Beth Shalom stands in the sanctuary of Temple Emmanuel besides the ark that contains the Holy Scriptures. Today, Temple Emmanuel has around 30 members. The generation that worked to build the temple are nearly gone, but thoughts of them live on. So therefore I, Jay Dean, by the authority vested in me as the mayor of the city of Longview, do hereby proclaim March 7th as Temple Emmanuel Day in Longview. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Judge.
One thing I would like to say, though, you know, growing up in South Louisiana, you know, in a family of 6 boys and a girl, my mentor, once I graduated from college and started working, was a man by the name of Irwin Davlin. He had moved his company from Framingham, Massachusetts to this little hole-in-the-wall, South Louisiana, Opelousas, and literally brought the Jewish faith to our community. And I enjoyed very much going. He was actually the Sunday school teacher, and going over and attending Sunday school, witnessed my first bar mitzvah, and had a heck of a time. And also I want to say, I hope last night your version of Mardi Gras went very well. Natalie invited me last night, and she said, let me tell, knowing me, she said, let me just explain what this is. This is your version of a Jewish Mardi Gras. So hopefully y'all enjoyed Mardi Gras last night.
Thank you. In Sunday school, it's called Purim. And when you say the word Haman, we have these rattles that go like this, so I knew I would be able to tell him more about it by talking about Mardi Gras. I would like to, at this time, ask a woman who has been Rusty's and my rock. She is a very, very fine lady and very accomplished with doing things the proper way and dotting the I's and crossing the T's. And Gregg County has the honor of having her as the chairwoman of the Gregg County Historical Commission. I would like to introduce you to Jim Meacham.
Thank you, Natalie. The pleasure's been all mine. We would not be here today without Rusty Milstein and Natalie Rabikoff. It's a pleasure to represent the Gregg County Historical Commission. We are appointed by Judge Stout and the Commissioner's Court. There are 21 members, and some of them are here today. I see Marion Richardson and Gwen Kersey Weatherford and Alan McReynolds and Janet Davis. And give them all a hand because they are the hard-working commission. One of our projects is the historical markers. It is a state marker sanctioned by the Texas Historical Commission. Every county in the state of Texas has a local historical commission that does this work, and it's to preserve the history of our communities, our local communities. It's to stand when maybe everything else is gone. The marker is to stand to remind people that this congregation was here, that this restaurant we dedicated Johnny Case's last week was here. And it's a way to publicly recognize our history. We all have a story, but you don't know our story unless we tell it. And so it's our great pleasure to do these markers and to work with this congregation to do one for the Temple Emmanuel. Thank you so much.
At this time, I would like to introduce a very fine young man I had the pleasure of meeting last night. He's our visiting rabbi, Jeremy Simons, and he will enlighten you not only on what he does, but about small Jewish congregations in the South.
Thank you, Natalie. As I was introduced, I am Rabbi Jeremy Simons, and I am here on behalf of the Goldring-Woldenberg Institute of Southern Jewish Life. It's a bit of a mouthful, but I want to share a little bit about our organization and the work we do. And first of all, let me say it's an honor to be here and to have been invited to be a part of this ceremony. Our organization has been around for 15 years now. And we were based in Jackson, Mississippi, and we were founded to support Jewish communities, particularly small Jewish communities, throughout the Southeast United States. We work in 12 different states, and within those states, we have 6 departments of different services we provide. I am the rabbinic department, and I am on the road quite often to provide assistance to communities in terms of worship and also education, life cycle officiation, everything that a rabbi would do to provide to communities that are too small to have a full-time rabbi of their own. In addition to my department, we also have an education department that educates our young people. We have a history department that captures the stories of communities, much like this one, as well as a museum department where we have exhibits and we collect the history so that people can remember it for the time to come. We also have a community engagement department which interacts with the larger non-Jewish world, particularly in the Jackson community. And finally, we have a programming department which provides cultural programming to communities throughout the South. We have artists, we have musicians who come, and speakers who will come and bring Jewish culture to places that otherwise might not receive it. If you'd like to know more about our organization, we do have some newsletters that are available when we have our reception across the way. And this is a very special edition of the newsletter because it features me on the cover. And I should point out it features the back quarter of my head, but still, if anyone would like, I will autograph them. But in addition, it does share more about the sorts of work that we do. Those familiar with Jewish history know that us Jews are often on the move. The Jews who settled here in America came from places like Germany, Poland, Russia, and also throughout Europe, throughout the world. But Jewish migration is far from a modern phenomenon. Before the Jews lived in Europe, we lived in the land of Israel, we lived in Babylonia, we lived in Egypt. Based on our history, it seems migration is an essential part of the Jewish story, and it is. This week in our Torah, we read from the portion called Ki Tisah, and this describes the sanctuary that the Israelites built in honor to worship God. The text speaks of Avnei HaChoshim, which is lapis lazuli. It speaks of wood that was covered in Zahav Tahor, pure gold, and even a roof made out of Orot Techashim, dolphin skins. This structure described would have been the most ornate building of its day. But the most incredible feature, even more so than the roof made of dolphin skin, was the fact that this entire building was designed to be transportable. That this ark, this Mishkan in Hebrew, was meant to accompany the Israelites as they wandered and to be disassembled and taken with them. The millennia that followed saw Jews continue their wandering throughout the Middle East and throughout the world. We can understand these migrations as having both a push and a pull. People move to pursue new opportunities and better futures. But they are also forced to move because of factors in the communities where they lived. While it's not fair to try to generalize whether it was the push or the pull that drove Jewish migration over the thousands of years, we can say it was largely often the push. Though most of the past two millennia, particularly in Europe, Jews suffered persecution that ranged from restrictions as trivial as what sorts of clothes they could wear, but also what sorts of jobs they could hold, what sorts of property they could own. It also led to pogroms, riots, and massacres. If Jewish history is seen as an endless list of tragedy, it's because oftentimes it was. However, our story here in America changes that. Jews have not only survived, but they have thrived in this country since its very beginnings. None other than George Washington himself welcomed the Jews. In the first year of his presidency, he wrote a letter to the Jewish community of Newport, Rhode Island, which I would like to quote from. Speaking to the community, he writes, "It is now no more that toleration is spoken of as if it were the indulgence of one class of people, that another enjoyed the exercise of their inherent natural rights. For, happily, the government of the United States, which gives to bigotry no sanction, to persecution no assistance, requires only that they who live under its protection should demean themselves as good citizens in giving it on all occasions their effectual support. May the children of the stock of Abraham who dwell in this land continue to merit and enjoy the goodwill of all other inhabitants, while everyone shall sit in safety under his own vine and fig tree, and there shall be none to make him afraid." It was in America that Jews found not just the right to practice their religion with freedom, but also acceptance as citizens. Jews came by the millions, pushed from the oppression of the old world and pulled by the opportunity that awaited them here. And here they thrived as a vital part of the American story. Today, we see another migration. But this time, Jews, along with Americans of all religions, find themselves pursuing opportunities that take them away from the homes of their parents. Jews who spent their whole lives living in Longview now see their children living in places like Dallas, Houston, Atlanta, as far away as Berkeley, California. Our Torah portion teaches this week that the Israelites, in their zeal to honor God, brought everything they had to help construct the sanctuary. At one point, Moses actually has to say, "Enough, stop." The Torah explains that their efforts had been more than enough. There was nothing left to do. So too do we find ourselves today. Temple Emmanuel has served the Jewish community of East Texas for generations. And while that day is not today, one day, this community too will have done enough. As we stand here dedicating this marker, let us celebrate the country that welcomed us. Let us reflect on all that has happened in this building, on the baby namings, the B'nai Mitzvah, the weddings, the funerals, and all other events. And finally, let us pray that God blesses us, people here of all faiths, in the works of our hands today and in the future. And we say, Amen.
I don't know if I'm supposed to say this, but I'll tell you something that's very interesting when he tells you how he moves around. He's on the road a lot. When he leaves here, he's going to Selma to the celebration. At this time, it's not on your schedule, your agenda, but we have two special presentations, and I would like Rusty to come forth and Jim Meacham, please.
Natalie, don't get comfortable.
Oh,
Make sure they don't leave.
you come over here first. I didn't know about this. I knew about you, but I didn't know about me.
Well, how very nice. How lovely.
I worked with Rusty to surprise Jim. I didn't know about this.
Okay, obviously I don't know how to do this. These two were amazing. We would have almost weekly meetings, and I would just sit there, and they would go back and forth about how to do this, the logistics of setting this up, where, you know, and I just sat there. So it is with great gratitude, Jim, Natalie, thank you very much. These are heavy. You might want to maybe put them in front of the ark
Sure.
for the time being.
Yes, lovely.
Okay,
Thank you both.
Thank you.
Natalie said, Jim needs Yellow Rose of Texas. Well, we have something else for Jim. This is from Temple Emmanuel.
Oh, thank you. You know, we do this from the goodness of our heart. We don't expect such beautiful flowers and gifts. There, see what it is. A lovely crystal
The trick box.
star.
Star David.
Star of David.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you. I will say that with the weekly meetings and Natalie's organization, that things change at the last minute. You know, the weather changed us, and we were able to roll with it because she had perfect planning in place. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thank you.
Now I have been instructed to call on Debbie Shellen, please.
Rusty is giving appreciation gifts to others, but we're also going to give an appreciation gift to Rusty as a surprise. In behalf of Temple Emmanuel, we want to thank you for masterminding today's meaningful project, the historical marker. Without you, none of this would have happened. And so we want to say, L'chaim.
Thank you, everybody.
Get up. Thank you.
Natalie, we'll open this later.
Yeah. We'll need it later. And now I would like to invite everybody to join us outside for the unveiling, and stay there because there'll be a little bit more going on before we come in for a light lunch. And please don't leave because it's going to be really good. That table's full back there. So I'll meet you outside.
I'll read from the program.
I have it.
May I borrow a program?
Just come up here.
Okay. Thank you. All right, this marker was the result of the hard work of Doug and
Willie
Rodmeyer. It goes into the stake and then it comes back out about a year and a half later. Temple Emmanuel. During the early 1900s oil boom, many Jewish families settled in northeast Texas. Longview's Temple Emmanuel, God is with us, has its origins in the 1936 Kilgore Temple, Beth Shalom, House of Peace. For 2 decades, Jewish families traveled to Kilgore for services until a new temple was built in 1957-58 in Longview with 54 charter member families. The sanctuary is an architectural representation of a menorah. During its existence, the members worked to serve the community through education, outreach, and fundraising. As the Jewish communities in the region began to decline, Longview's Temple Emmanuel became the repository of Jewish activity and memory for the area. This marker is dedicated in 2014, was dedicated in 2015, but was actually produced in 2014, and it's the property of the state of Texas. Thank you. Thank you.
Retire the colors.
Ecclesiastes teaches L'kol Zaman, there is a time for everything. Hiyu l'ratzon, may it be your will, O God, that this marker may serve as a testament to all that this country can be and all that has been experienced in this community. May it stand as a symbol of joy, of sorrow, of memory, and of us, the Jews of Texas. We thank you, God, for always allowing us to gather together to celebrate this moment. We say, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, shehachianu v'kiyamanu v'higianu lazman hazeh. Amen.
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 With my closing remarks, I will tell you it has been a real joy to be a member of this congregation. I was a kid growing up in Houston when Rusty and Mindy and Audrey were doing their thing at the congregations that they were living in the communities and working with. And we have had lots of fun and memories here, but I don't go down that quickly, that this is here for the future, that when we're gone. You folks are going to be out in the community, and when you hear about somebody moving a business here or with economic development, working with realtors or whatever, any one of us you can call on and we'll work with you. Bring them here, because I've done that before. But unfortunately, I found out from talking with headhunters, the people outside of this awesome community and the beauty of this community, but the people that they have living here, think we're a bunch of rednecks, and I don't put up with that very easily. So I'm counting on you to be our ambassadors to the real world to tell them what they're missing by not being here. And I want to thank you very much for coming and to tell you that we've got an awesome spread inside, and you're welcome. And we're thanking you again for coming. It's been a real joy.
Thank you, Natalie.
Good job.